Shock! Explosions almost under the Crimean crossing. Ukraine is taking back the peninsula. The worst thing for the Russians has already happened. Shahed terror has been officially shut down. That was the last attack. For the enemy, everything will change dramatically from now on. Our people managed something sensational. The world still can't understand how Ukrainians came up with this. First details. Lukashenko has pushed aggression to the border with Ukraine. The Ukrainian armed forces are showing their teeth. This is the final warning. Next, a fierce battle will begin. Will Ukrainians walk right into Putin's friend's office? Unexpectedly, Armenians are at each other's throats. The Kremlin is launching a new tactic but still doesn't know that all of Putin's plans have long since been leaked. Is Yerevan entering the storm to topple the dictator? All of this in our episode Hellpoint. Unexpectedly for everyone, Crimea has turned into a real bomb for Putin. The Ukrainian armed forces control Chonhar. Our forces have broken through to the very heart of the occupation. Aksionov didn't even have time to blink. Russians are refusing to enter the peninsula. A full-blown fuel crisis, the final chord of revenge. You will be shocked by the cunning plan our people pulled off. Don't miss the first sensational details. Coming up next. Ukraine has broken the strategic land corridor to Crimea.
The number 60. Exactly 60 in total. Right there.
1,000 Russian soldiers have been left without fuel and supplies. An ammunition storage facility in Mizhiria was hit. In Jankoy, a train carrying fuel and military equipment caught fire. The Donetsk-Mariupol highway to Crimea, one of the key rear logistics lines, has become a road of death for the occupiers. Fuel tankers and army trucks regularly come under attack. The Chonhar checkpoint is currently also under the control of our military. The video shows how with great precision and skill the fuel tankers traveling from Russia to Crimea along the Melitopol-Jankoy highway were hit. And the so-called leader of the occupied part of Kherson region, Saldo, has banned movement through the Chonhar checkpoint. The ban on civilian movement is essentially an admission by the collaborators that the armed forces of Ukraine control the land corridor with their fire. Allowing only military transport and essential goods highlights the scale of the problem.
And this also means that Russia's southern group and the occupying forces in Crimea are being actively and increasingly cut off from supplies. Believe me, even now, some of the high-ranking collaborators are already evacuating their families out of Crimea, clearly seeing where all of this is heading.
In the past, military convoys would hide among civilian trucks, using them as a human shield. However, the situation has now completely changed. The empty M14 highway shows that any large truck is now automatically identified as a military target.
Again, when we take into account the full capabilities of our drones and when we take into account the capabilities of including our strategic naval components, we fully understand that there will also be naval support. Our drones are capable of operating, including against the port of Berdyansk itself, no matter how very well it is guarded. That is, at the very least, such strikes will be delivered from several directions today. This development will also, in any case, be directly connected to this extensive land route, to this strategic economic corridor, and to all of our major international ports. There is indeed occupation of this area. Everything is obvious.
Putin and the Kremlin claim that Ukraine's attacks on oil refineries have not affected the situation in any way. The Ministry of Energy of the Russian Federation stated that the situation on the domestic motor fuel market in Russia remains stable and under control. And there have been no recorded disruptions in supplying the regions.
In connection with this, we apologize for the understandable concerns, although these are objective reasons. Nevertheless, in order for us to be honest and open with you in this situation, I must say that the tension will persist for some time.
But then why did the Russian Federation start restricting gasoline sales at gas stations? Just like last year, the fuel crisis began in the annexed Crimea. The price of 100-octane gasoline has crossed the 100 mark. And now it costs 107 rubles. In Sevastopol, gasoline was limited to 20 liters per car, and in some places diesel began to be distributed only with coupons. Long lines are already forming at gas stations as residents fear further shortages.
Bam, take a look at this right here. What we are seeing is a serious lack of fuel across the entire Crimea region, with gas prices hitting 43.20 per liter. Diesel is 81 rubles. Damn, so when? Where to? Why are we heading in this direction? I honestly don't understand this situation at all. There were such strange conclusions coming from various interesting personalities, like Solovyov, for instance, where he explicitly said that all bloggers should be jailed, and in general, everyone who films anything should be jailed. We really have nothing left at this point. I fully support those who make such videos and continue to say that we have a serious problem here. The only thing that we can do is talk, shout, and show from different corners of Russia exactly what is happening with prices here.
The head of the city appointed by Russia, Rozvazhayev, stated that there are logistical difficulties and asked local residents to treat this situation with understanding and not to create artificial panic.
Today, the mayor's office is being bypassed, which has already demonstrated its effectiveness. And in order to avoid excessive panic, the dispensing and sale of fuel at the TS gas stations will be limited. No more than 20 liters per car or per canister. That is, a driver who arrives at a TES gas station can purchase 20 liters of fuel, either into the car or into a canister. A man who arrives with a canister at a TPP gas station can also purchase 20 liters.
Sebastopol, Stavropol, the first region whose authorities imposed restrictions on fuel sales due to Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries. Before that, gas stations began to complain about the lack of AI-92 and AI-95 gasoline.
The ancient city of Ryazan serves as a major historical and administrative center in western Russia, situated beautifully along the banks of the Oka River and boasting a rich heritage that dates back many centuries. Full tank for sports? Simply no. 95th. Where to go? Is there any information?
More on gas station country. As a result of Ukrainian attacks over the past 2 weeks, all major refineries in central Russia have significantly reduced crude oil processing or completely halted operations. All major oil refineries in central Russia. The plants in Ryazan, Moscow, Nizhny Novgorod, Yaroslavl, and Kryshi have been hit. Putin's press secretary Peskov stated that the Kremlin does not see any risks to Russia's fuel supply after the drone attacks.
A Kremlin spokesperson acknowledged that in some regions of the country, fuel production might experience a temporary decrease, but linked the reduction to ongoing seasonal maintenance work. According to Peskov, the fuel balance has the necessary compensation system, and the Ministry of Energy is monitoring the fuel situation.
Meanwhile, Crimea risks facing a total shortage of everything. The ferry crossing is closed, and on the side of Putin's land corridor, our drones are standing guard. Meanwhile, after Ukrainian strikes on oil refineries, problems with gasoline are spreading across all the occupied territories. After Crimea, restrictions on fuel sales have also been introduced in the occupied part of the Zaporizhia region. Gauleiter Yevgeny Belitsky announced temporary difficulties with delivering gasoline to gas stations. Because of this, fuel began to be sold with limits per person. This land corridor was important for Putin, after he realized that the Crimean bridge could be destroyed by Ukraine at any moment. But even here, he miscalculated. The armed forces of Ukraine are steadily and confidently advancing, disrupting Putin's plans, and cutting off and destroying the enemy forces' logistics. It's official. The Shaheds have come to an end. Ukraine launched interceptors destroying Russian hardware at the GRU. The world witnesses our triumph. Now, enemy shoot-down rates are at their peak. In Moscow, they're biting their elbows in frustration. Billions of dollars have been wasted. The tactic of terror isn't working. The West is luring Ukrainian technologies to its side. Kyiv is leading the way. How was this achieved? Here are the first details. Don't miss it. Ukraine has successfully learned how to shoot down 97% of Shaheds. These are the figures reported by analysts from the Wall Street Journal. In the publication, Ukrainian air defense is directly called one of the most effective in the world. Over the past week, on average, out of more than 100 enemy UAVs, no more than a dozen reached their targets each day. The true test of strength came on the night of May 24th. when Russia simultaneously launched 90 missiles and 600 drones. Amid the enormous workload on air defense, 549 drones were successfully shot down.
This part is very important and significant. Of course, to neutralize and shoot them down, all of them, somewhere along a certain line where we can intercept them, like a wall. Air defense, even layered air defense, is not always entirely successful because there is a significant lack of sufficient means of interception. The numbers today are impressive, 690 aerial attack assets, but they can't all operate at the same time. Either a Western fighter jet is operating or even a Soviet one, or ground-based systems are working. That is why it is exceptionally challenging to shoot down such a large number of various types of military assets, each with different speeds and flight trajectories, all flying to the same place at the same time.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense is actually predicting the end of the Shaheds. Even the few that reach their targets in Ukraine, often civilian ones, actually do not cause the intended damage across the border, the kind of damage they are counting on.
Even the enemy, who doesn't count their money, understands that launching Shaheds worth $70 million at a time, with a questionable success rate of about 5%, is a pipe dream. And
the Russians could only dream of such a high rate of UAV destruction. Ukrainian drones break through Putin's air defenses every time. Moreover, as it turns out, they are capable of overcoming even 3 layers of Moscow's air defense. So the strike in Taman, which was in response to the attack on Kyiv, no longer really...
It truly should not have come as a shock or a revelation to a single person involved in this situation, as the outcome was entirely predictable from the very beginning and didn't actually manage to catch anyone off guard or leave them feeling particularly surprised by how things eventually turned out in the end, given that every single sign pointed toward this exact conclusion for quite some time now.
To put it in another way, this is a major strike on a vital logistical hub in Russia's oil export network.
When discussing the matter of Ukraine's capabilities, our military has consistently and publicly stated that they are ready to share these capabilities with international partners. Of course, on mutually beneficial terms. After all, there is truly no air defense system of this level anywhere else in the world.
Today, Ukraine possesses unique experience in protecting the airspace of a large country and safeguarding critical infrastructure facilities. We are not talking about some separate systems that can be manufactured or purchased under contract somewhere. We are talking about a unique system that integrates many aspects. Without having created such a system, it is simply naive today to say that any country or its facilities are protected from modern threats that an enemy can deploy from the air. That is impossible. It is necessary to create a unique air defense system. Ukraine already possesses such experience.
The unmatched effectiveness of Ukrainian air defense is widely acknowledged and respected even in the West, especially when it comes to countering drones. Multi-million-dollar contracts, including those with Middle Eastern countries, are compelling evidence that confirms this.
I firmly believe that Ukraine can absolutely and fully become a truly significant exporter. In terms of security, and this can be included here, specifically focusing on drones as well, and a certain amount of specific information or partial information, since we absolutely must maintain the golden share for ourselves. Somewhere it is the direct assembly of components, while in other places it is comprehensive training, of course, for all of our specialists. That is to say, we provide a full package of security export to the necessary locations today for the various countries that are interested in this.
But Ukraine has no intention of stopping simply at interceptor drones or, let's say, various specific and advanced models of air defense operations. Hundreds of new startups are already currently in the development pipeline to the dairy, though dozens of them will successfully transition into tangible realities. And all of this is being done with one primary goal: to remain one step or even several steps ahead of the competition, ahead of the enemy. Alarming signals from the north. Lukashenko has suddenly put the rapid response forces on wartime footing, while the Kremlin is preparing another 100,000 mobilized troops. It seems that in Moscow they've pulled out the old maps again and want to play the Belarusian direction. A 20-kilometer gray zone in the Chernihiv region, new provocations, and even talk of another push toward Kyiv. Minsk is playing as if it's the last time. What could this mean for them? Let's watch. Russia is considering several scenarios for action in northern Ukraine, from creating a buffer zone in the Chernihiv region to attempting another advance toward Kyiv. According to RBC Ukraine, the most realistic scenario, if Russia does launch an offensive, is an attempt to create a buffer zone in the Chernihiv region with a depth of up to 10 to 20 kilometers. The least realistic scenario, a new offensive on Kyiv, For a possible operation in the north, the Kremlin may be preparing an additional mobilization of another 100,000 troops. According to one of RBC Ukraine's sources, they will not be able to launch a major offensive, in line with one of the options chosen by the Russians, any earlier than originally anticipated. This autumn, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that the Russian dictator Putin wants to persuade the self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Lukashenko, to join new Russian aggressive operations. Does a threat from Belarus to Ukraine exist? Most likely it does. All the more so because this is being discussed more and more seriously at the highest level, including by the president of Ukraine. At the same time, it should be understood that it is unlikely that Lukashenko is eager to enter this military conflict, since he probably understands this perfectly well. What are the potential threats? This creates them for him. Indeed, Father Lukashenko recently stated that Minsk does not intend to get involved in the war in Ukraine. He clarified that this would only be possible in one case, if Ukraine commits aggression against
every single one of those specific individuals and the wide variety of different items and objects that we were discussing and mentioning in great detail during the extensive conversation we had much earlier today. Regarding his statement that Belarus will be drawn into the war, I just said that it will only be drawn in one specific case. If aggression is committed against our territory, and here it's not about being drawn in, but rather, as you heard from the President of Russia himself, we will jointly defend our homeland where the two states are located, stretching all the way from Brest to Vladivostok.
At the moment, a general or open mobilization has not been declared in Belarus. However, targeted training measures are being carried out. The country regularly conducts scheduled call-ups and military assemblies for reservists. In addition, on May 21st, Putin and Lukashenko held the second stage of joint nuclear force exercises. This indicates an increasing level of Russian control over Belarus. Russia has more opportunities to use Belarusian territory for its military operations. Although for Lukashenko, getting involved in the war against Ukraine is not advantageous. It seems like Lukashenko's life was just starting to return to a sense of normalcy. The US is lifting sanctions, everything seems like it should be going smoothly, and now getting involved in a full-scale military conflict is probably the very last thing he needs. But at the same time, he's obviously forced to somehow respond to the constant pressure from Putin, which is clearly only growing more intense by the day. In other words, Putin obviously needs it as soon as possible. The war in Donbass. For this, it's necessary to stretch out the Ukrainian forces, and to do that, a threat needs to be created against Kyiv and Chernihiv. That's why probably the pressure on Lukashenko in this regard is huge and very serious. One thing is clear, Lukashenko, as always and as has become his tradition, will maneuver. It is known that right now he is forced to maneuver, on the one hand constantly portraying a willingness to support Putin in words, always declaring that he is ready, that he will literally always help, support, do everything. But in reality, the last thing Lukashenko probably wants is to actually
get involved in this war. That is why I believe these statements from the Ukrainian authorities are, first and foremost, support for Lukashenko, emphasizing that no matter how much Putin threatens him, if he directly decides to involve himself in this war, the consequences for him will be far worse than anything Putin has promised him.
Experts say Belarus's army lacks the experience, strength, and capabilities of Ukraine's.
It's completely unclear how the Belarusian army would behave against the Ukrainian army, which has already faced an incredibly intense and determined level of resistance from a much more formidable and dangerous enemy. In addition, Ukraine has recently substantially bolstered and expanded its capabilities in terms of long-range strikes and drones. Ukraine is successfully striking oil refineries located deep inside the heart of Russian territory. That is, SBU sanctions are now effectively extending their reach all the way to Perm and Tuapse, all the way to the Urals and the Leningrad region.
Per RBC, activity and threat levels in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction are low. However, leadership is monitoring signs that may indicate Russians are preparing for potential offensives in the north. Specifically, this involves the number of troops near our northern borders. In Belarus, 4 army battalions are stationed. That's about 1,900 personnel rotating constantly. Russian forces lack the numbers to conduct offensive operations from either Belarus or the Bryansk region. Still, regardless of the situation, Ukraine is not letting its guard down. According to President Zelensky, all defense units are bolstering protection in the Chernihiv-Kyiv direction. Relevant data and signals will be conveyed to Belarus.
Across all of these strategic directions, we will ensure that the population can maintain full confidence that Ukraine is protected, the armed forces are fully deployed and ready, the necessary weapons are readily available, and the required personnel are present in sufficient numbers. And even if the enemy is considering potential moves, they will see what forces are here. I think that
Urgently, the Kremlin is sharply changing its tactics in Armenia, changing the players on the battlefield. Instead of influence, the focus is now triggering internal chaos and national collapse. Moscow is using its full arsenal, disinformation and social destabilization. Putin is now pressuring sensitive topics like power and the church. The Kremlin has shifted to a strategy of harsh destabilization. Less diplomacy, more covert operations. Will such a final explosion happen? Let's watch. The closer the parliamentary elections in Armenia get, the more actively the Kremlin mobilizes. After failures in Moldova and Hungary, Putin will not simply let the Armenians slip from his suffocating embrace. Following the foul-mouthed propagandists, Russian intelligence officers and provocations have joined the offensive against Pashinyan and his party.
Armenia's strategic intentions to join the European Union, of course, necessitate careful and thorough consideration.
After Armenia and Azerbaijan reconciled over the Nagorno-Karabakh issue, Nikol Pashinyan became openly bolder but did not cross the line. The Armenian government is trying to maintain a balanced and friendly relationship with Russia.
Our relations with the Russian Federation have never been, and they certainly will never be in question, because, as I have already stated, these ties and relations are very deep and are absolutely not open to any form of debate or discussion. Our relations with the Russian Federation are very deep. They are of the utmost strategic importance to us. And, in my opinion, they are continuing to develop in a highly dynamic and robust manner in the context of the new realities in our region. When peace has been established between Armenia and Azerbaijan, after all, I believe that this is having a constructive and beneficial influence on our diplomatic relations with the Russian Federation as well.
But every now and then, official statements coming out of Yerevan could cause the Kremlin to grit its teeth.
We will not allow the Republic of Armenia to become a province. We will not be governed like Belarus.
Outbursts from Pashinyan himself, such as suspending CSTO participation, criticizing the Russian security model, as well as the de facto démarche of holding an EU summit in Armenia, where among the NATO guests was Volodymyr Zelensky, have provoked a wave of bitter hatred from Putin's pawns.
Pashinyan is a deceitful traitor to the Armenian people and is leading Armenia to a state of total destruction.
I insist that more of these types of individuals, no matter how many vote for him, should never appear in our capital again. It's truly difficult to imagine a greater humiliation and insult than what he forced upon all of us on the eve of a great holiday.
But Putin did not forgive Pashinyan for refusing to come on Victory Day. And on May 9th, during the dictator's press conference, the issue of Armenian-Russian relations became one of the first topics discussed. Putin, as usual, hinted that those who are disobedient, Moscow first punishes with the ruble and then with the sword.
So at this very moment, we are experiencing everything that is currently unfolding on the Ukrainian front. But how did this all actually begin? With Ukraine's accession or attempt to join the entire European Union.
The closer it gets to June 7th, the date of the parliamentary elections in Armenia, the more hysteria there is in the Kremlin. Analysts say that social networks have literally been flooded with posts from the Russian troll factory. And sometimes the Kremlin bots manage to hit the sore spots.
This ongoing situation profoundly impacts every facet of Armenian society today, and it is inextricably woven into the long-standing pervasive operations of the Russian security services which have historically exerted a deep and multifaceted influence over the nation's internal political landscape and its broader social stability for several decades. I am absolutely certain that these people actually have no connection to Armenians or Arabs. But this particular attempt is, how exactly should I put it, is an attempt to further escalate the ongoing political situation in Armenia, because all of these current events refer directly back to the significant losses experienced in 2023. And this Karabakh topic is undoubtedly the painful subject spot. And of course, this video exploded and went viral across various social media platforms, and the surrounding political discourse and public debate became incredibly heated and deeply polarized, with everyone starting to accuse and blame one another from all sides of the political spectrum.
Besides the propagandists, the Russian special services are not sleeping. The publication, The Insider, released a large-scale investigation naming exactly who in the presidential administration oversees this area and which SVR, GRU, and FSB officers the Kremlin sent to Yerevan to deal with disobedient candidates. The information campaign against Pashinyan is coordinated by the recently established Presidential Directorate for Strategic Partnership and Cooperation. It is headed by the appointee of the first deputy chief of the presidential administration, Sergei Kirienko, Vadim Titov. In Moscow, as always, they deny everything. That's all for this segment. This was me, Darina Hutsakalo. Even more scorching news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.